Welcome to Beyond the Pendulum. Let me just make sure that we are streaming. Looks like that we're live on Twitter. Hold on, let me do some self promotion because this is a very low budget show. Hold on. I can't even look at my own thing. There we go. A little bit of self promotion, puts it to my personal one. And we are going to self-promote it here, and boom. All right, self-promoted, done. So a lot has happened. Sorry, I was out of the hiatus for last week. I was definitely sick as a dog, and I'm still not 100% from where I was before. The I'm just gonna give you a heads up. This show is not gonna be 100% about the paranormal um, or the obscure, as this show is all encompassing. But there is some funny stuff that has been going on with the CIA, specifically, and I know other shows have talked about this, but me and a couple other people that I know have been covering this Havana syndrome from God, for the mid 2015, somewhere around there, 2016, and we've heard everything from crickets to whatever. But the National Institute of Health was studying the Havana syndrome. I disagree. I read the paper. I read the follow up of what the National Institute of Health was doing when they were doing the MRIs of the brains of these guys that were on Havana syndrome. There is a strong disconnect between what the lawyers that are defending that were representing the patients and their doctors were telling that there was absolute signs of TBI or brain damage, but the National Institute of Health was saying otherwise under their MRIs. Now, the NIH is more apt to fudging data due to their funding coming from the federal government and grants and or wherever the hell that they're going from. But that might have been another strong arm thing because now they were saying that the CIA was basically saying, telling all these patients that, hey, if you if you are suffering from Havana syndrome, you need to sign an NDA, and the only way that you're going to get treatment is if you basically shut your mouth. And all the patients that were involved with the NIH had stopped, and they were strong armed to shut up. And now we are dealing with another cover up. And you're probably not going to hear about Havana syndrome for a while. I don't know. I'm starting to actually move away from the microwave weapon type scenario. And there was something that Uri Geller had said, and I am kind of in the know about these obscure weapons that these really weird KGB groups, or FSB now, have been involved in these really weird weapons, something called psychotronic weapons, and it's a very loose canon, a cornucopia of techniques and other stuff that they use in technology to inherent harm or make somebody do something that they normally wouldn't do themselves. And this might explain some of the odd stuff that we are hearing, because a lot of times when the Havana syndrome, the people, when they were it was really strange because the when they were under attack, or whatever the hell was attacking them, it was only confined to a room, which is very, very weird. But you would also expect this with the microwave weapon. Specifically, what I heard the damage was the microtubules in the protein structures of the brain were damaged, which would cause TBI. I don't know. Other than excerpts and whatever, the CIA is doing their best to cover up whatever Havana syndrome is. I'm not 100% certain that Uri Geller's right or the psychotronic weapons are right, but we might be dealing with something that the world isn't ready to know about. I don't know. I really don't know. It's really kind of up in the
That's
air.
almost well, if it's not microwave, I mean, you can hit somebody with high enough energies of practically any frequency. If you focus it enough and mess them up. Um, I'm almost thinking, instead of like maybe it could be they're uh, exposed to about a low energy, like say ELF for long periods of time, or did they just get zapped by like a tooth X-ray, but a big pulse of something else, and they didn't even know what it was. It could be so fast you wouldn't even notice it.
It's yes, psychotronic weapons do use the will use in some of the iterations will use sound in their techniques, but psychotronic weapons are very 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 niche and out there tech, more along the lines of bordering occult and like mind control shit. But I wouldn't put it out there. And you might be right. It might even be really 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 low band LRADs or whatever. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, if guys like they're working on a radar station or something, if they stand in front of that beam when that thing pulses, I mean, you're going to do damage too. It doesn't always have to be microwave or just ELF. I mean, you can get hit with a lot of different ranges, and still, as long as the power level's high enough, you're going to suffer some damage.
Yeah, I think what the CIA is trying to do is they don't want to scare the public into saying that hey, these weapons can be used on anybody, and we are not ready to tell you what the hell they are.
Yeah, I think that well, that's been like maybe a holy grail type item, of wanting to be, if you could get inside your enemy's mind and make them kill themselves, or just make them lay down their weapons, something along those lines. That kind of psychotronic weapon, or some kind of telepathy. You win.
Well, yeah, we did buy, psychotronic weapons were used at Waco. We did buy some off the KGB shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union, and they tried using it and it didn't work. Um, I've heard that story quite a few times. Trying to convince the guy to give up, that he wasn't the real Jesus and whatever the fuck he thought he was.
A branch
Um,
Davidic.
yeah. Let me see. We have a new UAP hearing scheduled for after the election, regarding for I think it's Senator Gillibrand or whatever her fucker name is, and Arrow. I think I don't want to ruin anybody's parade, and just be prepared to be disappointed. I believe this is in response to their fucking third grade level book report they did at the last minute, when they basically poo pooed everything. And basically, what Senator Gillibrand wants is what the consensus of the American people want to hear is, we don't want to hear what you can explain away. We want to hear the unknowns, blah, 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 blah. And what they're going to do is they're going to throw us blurry images of whatever and whatever. And this is where I like to tell people in the UFO community, the only way that these people are going to admit anything is they're going to have to come out kicking and screaming. The American public will not 100% believe this. You could have a fucking UFO, parked in your driveway with a live alien, and people won't believe that it's real or whatever. It's hard to, it's hard to, one, you don't need the American government to tell you that this shit's real. Try to use some critical thinking. You're looking to big daddy government and somebody that's been lying to you for the 80 years, and we already have a rogue military industrial complex, which we will get into, kind of pulling the strings on everything. Those guys are going to want to dominate control, and it's going to be this filter down effect, kind of like you always hear about these conspiracy theories about the there's a guy on the top, or the Illuminati, whatever the fuck you want to call it, the boogeyman. These people are not going to give up all their cookies, and it wouldn't be surprised if they're in cahoots with the whatever is coming and freely going with our on our planet. We are one jelly being, you know, ahead more than we were, where we should be like up to like a couple thousand, as far as how much the government knows at some level. And there's don't get your hopes that high. I'm glad that these are happening at some level of the government, but this is not how this story is going to end. I would be surprised if they, the president or whoever the president is at the time will say, "Ladies and gentlemen, blah 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 blah." The speech where they're supposed to, the American president is supposed to be the intergalactic liaison for us. I think he was designated the American president, right?
Yeah, according to I think the UN, yeah, the president of the U.S. is usually the guy that would meet the alien. I mean, if you
Yeah,
can imagine that, yeah, it's just like holy shit.
yeah. So just don't expect everything, and hey,
You you
keep your
know
head
you
and
know what
keep.
gets me is why Democrats seem to take such a special interest in this. You had like going back over 20 something years now is you had Harry Reid uh, big into it, and then you kind of had Schumer over these like the committees, kind of watching all this, and now you got this Gillibrand, and other Democrats. Like they seem to have more of an interest in it than the other party, and I'm curious why.
Yeah, me too. I hear about this 2027 event, or there's something coming up. I don't have any intel on that other than rumors. If history of humanity is any kind of thing that we can look at, every 20,000 years there's a great catastrophe that happens. You see, last ice age was like almost 15, 16,000 years ago. So we're right about due for another catastrophe. Who knows? Who knows if that's what it is? I really don't know. But there's these lefty loos, and the Dems are more in hand with the CIA than these guys pulling the strings than anything else, which really weirds me out. I mean, you hear even Trump. Trump was talking on that show, and he admitted that he had talked to pilots, and while he was in the office, that said that we're seeing UFOs out there. You know.
Yeah, it's and some of them, you look at like the global number that there are every year. If you just whittle it down, it's like stars in the sky. It's like if you say there's 40 or 50,000 reports worldwide. Well, if it's 1%, hey, that's still like one or two like legitimate ones per day.
What's actually
Part I think part about disclosure is we're all looking for like the big whiz bang moment. Where they roll out the UFO and our reverse engineer and all this and show us something that's truly out of this world. Uh, but the dribble is there all the time. This has been going on for how long? It's like the constant sightings. different parts of the world, the different ways they're seen, the paranormal, aspect of it too. It's just it's happening all the time. Disclosure is happening on a daily basis, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's actually much more scary from what I hear from the pilots that have these new radar systems. That almost every time they're up there, they're painting targets that shouldn't be there. If you know what I mean.
Yeah,
They're
yeah. Well, there still seem to be these craft that can be detected by our stuff, even our newer equipment, and then you have these others that are like cloaking themselves somehow. You know, maybe in some way to radar, yet they show up on infrared. A little bit. It's there's just like the UFOs themselves. There's different types of encounters going on. With different equipment.
Yeah. For all we know, we could just be some big ass farm. Stay on your
Yeah,
farm.
there's going to be a whatever let's say after the Big Bang, the first civilization that gets their shit together and starts expanding is the ones that were really going to win in the long run. And I would say, we're probably later to the game. If you look at places around us, it's just there could be, if there's a civilization out there that's a million years ahead of you, you're at a serious disadvantage.
Well, there's a lot
I
of
mean, how do you overcome that? Just
well, there's also a lot of evidence that I've been seeing is that even though there is a lot of evidence of Homo erectus and other stuff, there's a lot of particular reason. There's more often than not, and this is something I've always leaned more towards that. We as Homo sapiens are kind of very artificial to our environment. We get sick more than any other mammal. We are more susceptible to our other things. And there was a scientist that did the complete genealogy and the rate that our DNA would have to get the proper mutations to get up to where we are, which would take about 50 million. Was it what they say?
I think it's
It,
billions of
it was a
years.
50, yeah, something billion
The
years.
normal, DNA accidents to happen where you would, get all these structures and everything. Yeah, it's a lot longer than the Earth has been around.
So yeah,
I think
there's
it's going
more
nuts.
more often than not we might we might be some experiment that was either here, but it's just like we are more susceptible to diseases than every animal in the animal kingdom,
Mm.
and that's not normal at all. And we don't see any in the history of recorded man, we don't see any sort of evolutionary changes other than the height changes, but that's usually due to dietary supplements. The as mankind modern recorded man has recorded, there seems to be a correlation of better diets equal. You're not going to be 4'9", you're going to be 5'10".
True.
I,
Yeah, I think that was fairly well documented around the French Revolution that the French used to be a lot taller, and before the French Revolution, and after everybody got so sick and starved and all the rest of it, there was a marked drop. After that period, within just their population, it does make a difference,
yeah,
and it happens fast.
yeah. In the Middle Ages, people were generally smaller too because they were eating just wheat and alcohol.
Yeah, the less water because it was unless you boiled it. Yeah, you kind of stayed away from water. You never knew.
And they believed that vegetables were poison. And there was a common misnomer that puts it.
Hmm.
tomatoes were poisonous. There was a lot of weird shit that was going on in the Dark Ages that makes no sense. I wouldn't be surprised if people just drunk 24 hours a day.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're drinking that much wine, you're going to be pretty lit. I mean, and what are the long term effects? It's just
Well, people didn't live that long either. The average age was like 40.
you know, it just seems like to me they would have had big pots, boiling more of their stuff and cooking things to a boil, and then you're probably all right.
Well, there was also a lot of stuff that they didn't during the Dark Ages. You didn't see a lot of aqueducts as we did with the Roman Empire. With the Roman Empire, knew is that if you had moving water, it was less
True. Yeah,
inclined to have diseases.
right.
And this was just not even 800 years later. People forgot all this shit, and drinking stagnant water is going to kill you. And I was just
Yeah, there
surprised.
was I don't know. It's almost like the burning of the Library of Alexandria. There's a period there where like knowledge was lost, whether it was for whatever the reason was. And I tend to blame the church for it too, because just like Copernicus, they're not really all that on top of their science. They had a problem with that one. So uh, yeah, I just wonder how much things have been done by them and other groups, on purpose.
Well, I believe the church was more of a power grab than it was a religious movement.
Yeah, that's what they're more concerned about. They all but they all but say it. Well, in the way
They
they act.
Well, they also made up about half of the Christian religion, and they just made it up. Like the stuff. There's more evidence there's more evidence than not to say that if you look at the Gnostics and the original apocryphal books that happened in the first 100 years after the death of Jesus, that painted a very different picture of what the fuck was going on at that time than what you see after the canon, because the original disciples of Christ, they were calling themselves the Gnostics, and a lot of them were kind of focused on the second life or what happened afterwards, and they were often encouraging each other to try and get murdered so that they can go to heaven to meet their master. And you don't hear about these kind of stories unless you get into the really weird Gnostic stuff, and there's a little crossover of the occultism in there. But they were, if you want to get a clear interpretation of what the fuck was going on at that time, you got to really move away from modern religion and more into like new age hippie occultism. And that seems to be more of what the fuck was being. These were like concepts that we're just rediscovering now through the new age, occultism here. But there was a lot of things being said at that time that just got forgotten over a period of a couple hundred years. And you can find it in all sorts of these obscure occult books, even in some of it even translated over into the rabbis that were the rabbi mystics that held their Kabbalism for through oral tradition, and we only see evidences of it ever being written in until like 800 when they were in Portugal. For some reason, they started writing it down. But if you look at the Roman Catholic, even if you look at the Roman Catholic communion, if you if you if people only knew how close to what that is to some other occult rituals, they'd be flabbergasted. If I could convince you, if it's these people who do the occult, they do the almost exact same thing that you are doing in just a different form. You're praying to some intermediate, you know, semi, or whatever the hell you think Jesus is, and then you're hoping that his mana or his power is going to come into that thing. Then you eat it, so that you become whole. I mean, that's more of an occult practice than anything else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, they seem to be. It's like a I call it, it's a blood magic cult in a lot of ways. You're or a cannibalistic cult. You're eating the flesh, drinking the blood. Um, it is strange. Why is that thrown in there? I don't understand why that's ever thrown in there as part of the ritual.
I don't either, and
I,
I do have friends who are high level Masons, and I don't care what people say about the Masons. They got the whole. If you guys think that those guys are the boogeyman, you guys got your problem. You guys got your boogeyman's wrong, because all Masonry is revolving around the same apocryphal concepts of God and the way of using occultism to unlocking these hidden mysteries. And there is a book that one my relative showed me, which was also known as the Gospel of Peace, which was a supposed one-to-one verbatim of what Jesus was actually saying, written by a follower of Christ at the time, which was never not one of the apostles or something. This was just a follower who had written it, and he basically had said, then this negates everything that the church says. Is that, hey, basically what he's saying is like, hey, I'm not God. I am, and the kingdom of God is like within you, and that you will do even greater works than I if you can only follow these rules, you know? And it was basically this weird plan where you can use divine power and hidden knowledge to better your fellow man, and then you get to this Judeo-Christian religion where you get Jesus is the gatekeeper between you and God, and that's not what was being
well,
said at the time.
yeah, on one hand, he's claimed that he's this intercessor, and on the other side, they say that he is actually God incarnate as man.
Yeah,
There's a lot of conflicts. That's one of them.
yeah.
So you say,
You can
well, then what is it? What and
you can blame all of that on John, the Gospel of John, and that wasn't written by John at the time. That was written three generations after him, and that's where you start to see the regular, hippity dippity Jesus turn into, Shaquille O'Neal and the Super Lakers flying around. There's a big there is some sort of hoopla dupla thing going on there where there was no mention of the rising, there was no mention of the second coming. In fact, there was no mention in a lot of the apocryphal books about the Last Supper. These are all like new things. But
well, yeah. Well, if you follow the story, let's see, Saul or Saint Paul in our lingo got all this information from a download on the road to Damascus, right? He's hit with this vision or struck down and has this vision, all right, and downloads all this.
yeah,
And then writes it down as if he was there. Like as you say, 2, 3 generations later, there's no writings from the time or from Jesus. We're hearing all this from Saul/Paul 80 years later, 3 generations later, somewhere along those lines. It's just, if you look at it in a cynical fashion, like any engineer or say a physicist would, you're breaking down something you're looking at, you have to come to the conclusion at some point that, this is probably a story written after the fact.
yeah,
That's what I get from it all. And
yeah. Next thing
and
you
then the
know,
distortions and all this dogma doctrines and all the rest of it, it's just more layered on top of it becomes ridiculous.
Yeah, that's one thing that
Yeah.
I do find in a lot of modern religions. You do find a lot of hoopla doopla and people faking things and trying to push a narrative that isn't there. And this is what turns people off about. That's not the main thing that turns people off about a lot of the organized religion. And this is something that I've been, delving into a lot in my life is the unknown, the occult, the weird stuff. Is that modern religion doesn't have all the answers to life's questions, and it doesn't.
Well,
It
for several logical reasons, because any of these people that claim to tell you what's going to happen after you die have no clue because nobody's died and come back. So where do they get this information or these beliefs that they have of how things are going to be after we're dead or in this afterlife? The whole idea itself, if you look at it logic, using logic and reason is comical at best because it's like you can't do it. There's no way for you to know that or speculate on it or anything, and worst of all, to claim that that's the way it is, and you were told by God. Now that's just outrageous. You know,
Well, actually, I often push the envelope even further because when I was doing a lot of more of my cult days, people would actually ask me like, "What about your concepts of the afterlife?" I said, "Well, why don't you talk to people that have died and come back, or had the NDEs?" And a lot of them will tell you that it's kind of a mixed bag of shit, and you kind of gotta take a lot of it with a grain of salt. That there are a lot for every I don't know, every 10 NDEs, there's about 8 liars, and two of them are actually legit. And so you got to sift through all the bullshit. But there's a general consensus is that anything you think about organized religion is kind of just not how it is. It seems to be that the the psychedelic experience or the psychedelic mindset of like the expansion of consciousness and whatever, and the great returning into the universal mind is the initial step over the great beyond. But we can't say for certain because now we're learning that the death process of the brain does not happen after physical death. It actually is a 30-minute process where the electrical impulses in the brain do really odd things that we didn't know about. That people thought that just because there was no oxygen in the brain, there was no activity, right? And it just starts degrading. And we find the more we were finding out in these new recent death studies that we've been doing, is that some really weird, strange things are happening where there is this weird state of brain state called the gamma brain state where you're basically like processing shit like a supercomputer level, and that is the common brain state that happens in the post-death process, as though the information that's all in there is being processed.
mm,
To what end, we don't know,
yeah, or where it's going. Is
or
that
where
just
it's
an
going.
internal? Is it an internal computation, or is it all being sucked off somewhere?
We don't know.
No, but
Just
my big thing, and then going back to like a physics and engineering background, is like, look, I have to accept what I know and can use in the physical world. I can't use things and speculate, and use anything useful in what mystically might happen after death. That doesn't. There's no way. There's no way to know that. I have to deal with what I know and can see and know through science, in the physical world, because that's really all I know.
well, yeah, that's kind of like a
That's it.
perspective of a lot of philosophers. The only true reality is the one that you experience, the one you live in, not
Yeah,
anybody
and
else's.
yeah, and then I mean, we can all have our different realities or perspectives, from the different people that we are, but um, at the same time, that I can't. People get into, if you if you're the type of person that wants to believe in a religion and accepts it on faith alone, you will believe anything after a while because you accept everything on just faith alone. There doesn't have to be any logic or reason to it. There's
Yeah.
a big divide that happens there, and I just can't do it anymore. I'm not going to continue to like fool myself about what I might know about what's going on later or some religion. It just I can't accept it as fact anymore or historical anything. It's just been manipulated and the political and all the rest of it. It's just I just can't do it. I have to, and it's important, for your own mental situation too. You have to be grounded in reality, right? That's always a big thing. Well, if I'm believing things that I'm told on faith alone, I'm not really that grounded because that's not the real world. That's not the physical world that you live in.
Oh
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
I want to stay grounded in the real world. Hey, there might be something else out there true. I don't know, but I'm not going to, pretend or act on things that I think I know based on what somebody's telling me or a book or all the rest of it. It's just, I can't do it. I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was, was at, maybe even not even a year ago, and then I started picking up this. Well, let's just say my personal life was just not going in a right direction, and I started picking up, the gateway process, and I think I'm learning more, not more about the metaphysical stuff, but more about myself and the way that I don't know. To each their own, but there seems to be something there that I'm not quite where I'm only like a month and a half in, and I'm just saying that like the way that I thought that my reality works, and the way that I interpret everything is I can just throw it out the door, and I'm kind of open to like the more you get into this gateway process, the your what I'm learning is that your ego and your conceptions that you think about how things are the limiting factors in how much you're going to get out of it, and it's a really weird Eastern concept, and I don't know. That's just my own TMI. I'm really just kind of new into this gateway process, but I'm starting to see the little light
Well,
bulbs go on.
yeah, I mean, and it gets back to uh, psychology because
Yeah.
I mean, I can, in my personal life, I'm very, like even mannered. It's like the same every day, very logical, etc. But I will tell you, if you're interacting with other people, a positive, first impressions and all that, it's not nonsense. That's what people key on. First impressions, having a good experience, a positive experience versus a negative experience. Well, which one would you rather have?
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to have a
I mean,
shitty
of
life
course,
or the good one?
you want a positive. Yeah, if we're working together in a positive manner, then we're, moving ahead, and everything else is a minus. So, I mean, and that's all perception and talk and how people feel and all that. It's, not necessarily reality. It is a reality, but that, using that to enhance an experience, goes a long way. Uh, I was never, you see, I was never into that, but I mean, I've watched some really good salesmen over the years, and a guy that's full of shit, real and very positive, that goes a long way. I mean, just the
But
positive aspect. It's not so much the bullshit. It's because, well, that's the reinforcement of all. But it's like if you're just that smiling, uh, pushy salesman, but positive all the time, man. I mean, that just in the end that works. That's
oh
that's
yeah.
the big sell right there. It's
Speaking of good and bad, let's get into this disinfo campaign that's going on and attempts at a cover up on the recent assassination attempts on this on our political candidate that's coming up, I would tell our listeners, hey, you know what? Hey, if I get kicked off of YouTube for a political narrative, so what? I really don't care. I could care less about YouTube or whatever. I just care about, maybe even for my own. Maybe I just maybe more care about the show and getting the information out there, and also do it for my own personal reasons. But don't believe this Russian narrative that has come up in the last few days. Don't believe into this Chinese war that's coming up. This is a narrative that's going to be pumped out into the political world that Donald Trump is going to is a rescue communist, which doesn't make any sense when people say it that way because they're not communists anyway, and that we are putting resources at the border of Russia. I can tell you one thing: Putin can give a shit less about whatever fucking Alaska it could do for them because it's not a priority for them. And to be honest with you, they are running out of manpower in this battle that they're facing on their eastern front. But what we are seeing is a major disinfo campaign on the American public, where there's a lot of people that don't even know that there was a second assassination attempt. I heard it only mentioned a few times in the last week. You know?
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, if I think if it was, getting if that was happening to the people on the other side, you would be hearing about it 24/7 on CNN
Uh huh.
nonstop. It would be the end of the world. The white right wing, lone wolf, wherever it was. I mean, it would never end. And you don't get that when it's the guy on the other side. It's just the
And
media is
there.
so biased. It's. I mean, I was trying to, going out there, visiting my mom today. It's like they have cable, and the first time I'd watched Fox and CNN in a long time, and it is such horseshit. I couldn't even. After a couple hours, I was done, man. It's just like this. This is ridiculous. What people are being told.
Yeah, now now people are being told a second story. Where the second shooter didn't give off a shot. He initially did, and then there was a attempt in Long Island where apparently there was a story where where explosives were found, and then there was a second story that was going around within hours of the first one, saying that they were training a canine unit to train things, and then the New York police was saying that none of it was true, and now I'm saying, like, well, where are these stories coming from? Why are these things happening in real time, and why are they? I know from law enforcement that they will poo poo and change the narrative for official things to catch perps that are out there, but there is some funny shit that's going on. Like, this guy, the second shooter, was not a nobody, and he does fit the profile, as does the other one, that there are some crazy guy. But why was he fucked up in court? I mean, laughing at his charges. Like, he was obviously doped up on something before he went there, and I'm just gonna put it out there. This guy is not gonna make it to a trial. He's not gonna make it to a trial.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, it just. Uh, well, the other thing, people are kind of noticing here, especially with like the second one, is like, how was this guy able to know he was there? This was like supposed to be an impromptu Trump going to play golf, and yet somehow this guy was like tipped off and knew he was going to be there. Well,
This
that
guy is
takes
homeless. He
some,
has no income, and
somebody in the know has to fucking know that. I
yeah,
mean,
he this guy was not a nobody. He has a Midwest arm, 7.62, AK style clone. No, sort of. It was more of an SKS style clone. But that gun alone is not cheap, and that's just not something you pick up at the fucking thing. And I'm telling you, how does a guy who has a fixed income of $3,000 afford a gun that's equivalent to $3,000? On top of it, I mean, people go, oh well, he could have got it from anybody. I'm like, but it looked out of the box, brand new. Where did he get this? Who gave it to him? People are not asking the right question. Where did he get the ceramic Kevlar vests and for the backpacks? This guy was equivalent of a homeless person.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like he was outfitted. It's like a separate, like here in Texas, we had that Uvalde massacre. There's this kid that pulled that off. He had a Daniel Defense, AR, which is like a $3,000 freaking gun. And you
Yeah,
say, well, he had a job, but he'd only had this job at the Burger King for like a month. So it's like, where the fuck did he get the money for all that shit? You know,
exactly.
so it's yeah, and then the whole response of the police and everything. It's just shady, man. Government has become so corrupt, and it does these shady things. And if the population had their head on straight, they would know their government's gone rogue, man. I mean, this is just not normal. And it just kind of glosses over, and everybody goes about their business like nothing happening. Like the Las Vegas massacre. I'll just sweep that under the rug. I mean, there's been a lot of shit happening lately, and you don't get any fucking answers. You just get
100%.
that wall of bullshit, and then it just kind of drifts off in the smoke, and then that's like the end of it. I was like, well,
Yeah,
hey, wait a minute, wait a minute, man. It's like,
yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to push this QAnon narrative, but there's a lack of critical thinking going on here. We did forensic acoustic analysis. There was a lot of it. At the MGM shooting, and there was definitely a second shooter. And you're saying that even at the Pennsylvania one, there was more than one shooter there.
oh yeah,
And now we're hearing the facts change here in real time. The American people are getting lied to, and I'm not a righty, I'm not a lefty, but I know when shit stinks, and
yeah, yeah. Whether,
I
whether yeah, that's the thing. See, no matter what party you're affiliated with, you're getting lied to. Now, if you're okay with that, which both these parties seem to be, I mean, it never really goes anywhere. All this cover up and nonsense, that never really gets flushed out or fixed. So they must be okay with it.
yeah,
I mean,
there's
it's that sad. It's just you don't really have elected officials that are pushing anything here that's for the country. I mean, it's just like, hey, we're gonna cut this nonsense off at the border. We're gonna cut this inner city nonsense off with all this days and all the rest of it. We're gonna get back to law and order, right? You just can't do whatever the hell you want,
well,
and it just never happens.
I can guarantee you
So,
one
and
thing.
what's so hard about that? It's
This election, and I don't know whoever the fuck is in office, if their number one priority is not to get the GDP, get the national debt in the green, if their goal is not the economy, I guarantee you that America will not be a first world country by the next term. We are like $1.3 trillion short of making our interest payments, just because the Fed lowered the things 0.75 or zero point 0.5, whatever. That still translates into high inflation. If whoever the fuck is in office is the economy is not their number one priority, then I don't know what the fuck you're doing in that Oval Office.
yeah.
There
I
won't
mean,
be
the
another
national
country.
debt has been downgraded twice, and it hasn't really been that big a deal. You went from AAA plus to like AAA, now you're AAA minus. Well, you're one step away from, you're not going to be junk bonds, but you're going into that intermediate range. It's like, and yet, so I don't think interest rates can ever get back to where they were because your debt is already getting downgraded. There's no way back to where you were unless you clean up your mess. Get your balance sheet, back in order. And these clowns just don't seem to be able to do it. It's just like, how friggin' hard is it to balance a budget?
Well, it's
It's
hard
not
when the
like,
Pentagon can't so when
it,
$1 trillion is missing every time they do audit, they don't know where it went.
yeah, because there's a lot of thieving going on, and you don't have anybody that's got the guts to stop it. And I don't know why. It's just like, you used to have, let's say, a Congress that wanted to assert its powers, or, well, every branch does, but You haven't really seen the Congress, do anything about the power of the person. That's always been their big. They could control anything by controlling the money, and now they're not interested in doing that. It's just like shit. Everybody gets whatever they want. The numbers go sky high. We just all live in denial, like a bunch of tween. Well, it's not even fair to tween girls with their daddy's credit card, because they don't know better. These people are supposed to know better.
Yeah.
You can't,
Well,
pluses and minuses. This isn't that hard to figure out.
oh, the American dream. Nobody can afford. Nobody can afford a fucking house. Nobody can afford nothing. You know. Like I'm just saying. Like if
Everybody's
the
leaving.
if nobody if the economy is not the number one priority of the next president, whoever the fuck that is, then America is a failed experiment. It is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it was a republic if you could keep it. That's what you were told from the beginning, and we hadn't really tried very hard to keep the republic for a long time. And yeah, you're now this democracy. They want to defend the democracy now, which I find amazing. It's just like, well, wait a minute, that's where did this democracy come from? You're supposed to be a constitutional republic. Well, what happened to that?
Exactly.
And all they worry about is democracy. It's like, well, I don't get it. It's just the lingo has changed. That's a problem because that tells you something else has changed too. You know?
Yeah. And I actually got to cut it off here. I got to put my kiddo to bed. Um, we'll be back on 3rd of October. 3rd of October.
Uh, okay, let's see here. Okay, that sounds right.
Yeah, 3rd of October. And